So if you'd like to learn how to make this beautiful steak and ale pie with puff pastry, stay tuned for the next episode of Hilltop Stovetop. Hello and welcome back to Hilltop Stovetop, the show where we're teaching you how to make great meals in an ordinary kitchen. Today we're making a steak and ale pie. Now this is actually one of my favorites. If I am out at a pub, it's one thing that if I see it on the menu, absolutely I'm going to order it. Now I wasn't planning to be filming today, but I did get my hair cut. And this is the first time, when there's been COVID lockdowns, you celebrate getting haircuts. So Mia at Cabeto's Hair Salon on Corden Avenue in Winnipeg, hello, and thank you for the great haircut. We're not going to let it go to waste. We are going to be filming today. And this recipe is one that I found on cal.com, KHAL.com. I recently started posting my videos there, and it's a website that's nothing but cooking videos, most of them just home cooks like you and I, and there's some really interesting stuff on there. So TJR MinT, I believe, was the website that I got this idea from. I'm changing it just a hint, making it my own. But the inspiration was there. So we are going to be using the Instant Pot today, and not because we need the pressure cooker, but again, just because it's great for filming. And I'm just going to step over Coco here and plug it in, because it works way better when you plug it in. Modern technology, So we're going to start it off with on the saute mode. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to cook the vegetables till they're tender. Then we're going to take them out. Then we're going to cook the meat. And then, after that beeps, then we're going to use our old friend, the frozen puff pastry, to make the pastry for this. So really it is just a matter of getting everything all chopped up. So we've got some oil in the bottom of the pan here, and get that warmed up. I've got one onion chopped, and you'll notice that all the vegetables I have are chopped to a similar size. So we'll start off with the onions. And then we are going to add in some chopped celery. And we have chopped carrots. And now the recipe called for parsnips. For starters, I didn't have parsnips. Secondly, parsnips are sort of my personal, I don't really like them. I'll eat them, but I don't really like them. So what I was able to find was a summer turnip. Now turnips come in two types. There's the big rutabaga ones, or a swede as they're called in some places, kind of an orange color, usually covered with wax. And they're very definitely a winter staple. One of my videos on the side dishes for your Christmas dinner, we did turnips. These are the summer turnips, which are white in color. They still have a purple top to them, but they're usually quite small, maybe about the size of a baseball or so. So I've taken that and chopped it up because I think that that will be a good addition to this recipe. So now we're just going to saute these until the vegetables start to soften. Now this recipe is about triple what the original recipe was. What I'm going to do is I am going to make up some pies today, but I'm also going to take the leftover filling that we're going to make today, and I'm going to utilize that, put it in packages in the freezer so that when I want to make pies in the future, I've got the filling all ready to go, and all I have to do is roll out thaw that out, roll out the crust, and pop it in the oven. So we'll see you in a few minutes after this has had a chance to soften up a bit. Okay, so we've got our vegetables pretty much done here. Now you'll notice that I hadn't added any water to that. And there is enough moisture in the vegetables that we didn't need to, but it's really important that you keep an eye on it and you keep stirring it, because otherwise it will stick to the bottom of the pot. So now we're gonna take that out. Now, if you'd wanted to dirty 2 pots, you could have been doing these 2 stages simultaneously, but I didn't really want to do that. Okay, so we'll put that back on the heat, add a little more oil. And the next stage is going to be getting the meat ready. And so what I've got here, this is just some round steak that's been cut up into small pieces. Going to add some flour to that. And a good bit of salt. And some pepper. And just make sure that we get all of that well coated. Okay, and then we're gonna pop this in a bit at a time. I'm not gonna throw it all in there because the object here is to get it browned. And if we threw it all in at once, it would just sort of stew more than browning. So 3 or 4 minutes per side, depends on how hot you've got this going. And then as it gets browned, we're going to add that into the vegetables. And once that is done, then we will be ready for the next stage. So we will see you in about maybe 20 minutes or so after I've got all of this browned, okay? Okay, so we're just about done our last batch here. And what I've been doing as we went along, of course you do end up with a whole lot of this brown goodness on the bottom of the pan. There actually is a name for it. I want to say it was frond, that the French call it. And so I had added a little bit of beef broth to the bottom of the pot at one point to deglaze that, and I'm going to add a bit more. I had started off with a total of 2 cups of beef broth here, and you're just going to, by adding a little bit of liquid and then scraping the bottom, you get that goodness off of the bottom, plus it doesn't continue to burn. Because we are going to keep using this pot as we go along. Okay, so you can see how by scraping all that up, we've ended up with really nice thick brown gravy. Plus it'll make it so that there isn't that bit burning on the bottom. So now we're just going to take all of our meat and veg and throw it back into the pot. Mix it all up. Now comes the really fun part. So the recipe called for Newcastle brown ale. Now I didn't happen to have any Newcastle brown ale. I did have McEwen's Scotch ale. I've also had this in pubs where they make it with Guinness, which is a stout. But we're going to go with what we've got in the cupboard. And the recipe, this is one part of the recipe I am really going to follow to the letter. The recipe specifically said that you should taste the ales. Oh my goodness, that is delicious. I'm going to have to go out and buy some more of this because we're going to use all of this up in the filling. So what we're going to do is, and the one thing about using an ale, it's got a slight bitterness to it, which goes very well with this meat. So we're going to take this bottle of ale, and you can see how dark brown that is. And you pour in enough. Actually, we might be okay here because it said you're supposed to pour in enough to cover the meat. Oh, so I do have a bottle to go with my dinner tonight. And then we're going to add in the rest of the beef broth. And I've got the equivalent of a couple of cloves of garlic. And for my recipe, I'm putting in about 1/4 of a cup of tomato paste. Like I said, I'm making a bigger batch of this than the recipe that I had seen. So now we're just going to let this continue to simmer until that meat is tender. And while we're doing that, I'm going to go online and order myself a new Pampered Chef scraper. I'm not sure what the real name for it is. I've had this for probably 15 years and I use it all the time, but I just noticed that I finally wore it out after 15 years. So it's time to invest in a new one. And I'll put the link to Pampered Chef down below in the description. So those of you that are in, at least those of you that are in Canada will be able to order some for yourself because it's great for scraping that stuff out of the bottom of the pot. Anyway, we will see you in a little while after this meat has had a chance to finish cooking. All right, so thank you for being so patient. You wouldn't believe how 45 minutes goes by pretty quick. And here we go, 45 minutes in, our meat is nice and tender. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous brown color. And just by having this cooking with the lid off, the liquid has reduced. We didn't add any extra thickening to this other than the flour that was around the meat to start with. This is thickened up all on its own. So I think that we are good to make some pies. So what we're going to do here, we're just going to move this off to the side a little bit. This out of the way. And we've got our old friend here, the frozen puff pastry. So this was the second half of a package that we had started with. I'm trying to remember what we made with puff pastry. It was something we made with puff pastry anyway. I'm sure we can go back through the videos and figure out what it was. But I only used half of the package at that time. And I didn't take this out too far ahead because it's quite warm in the kitchen. And if you take this out too soon, it it gets kind of melty and not great. Adding a little bit of extra flour just so it doesn't stick, because that's what will happen when it gets too warm as well. Like even the edges where it's melted more, that's starting to get kind of sticky. I can feel with my hands here. So if in a perfect world I wouldn't have to roll it, but I am going to, just to get those ridges out of there. Because it's, I had opened it up in the freezer at one point. It's a little bit dry on the corners, but nothing that we can't fix, right? Okay, and now we've got some little pans here. These are great when you can do them in individual sizes. So I'm just going to take that with a little knife and cut out the top. Wasn't tough enough with the top here. There we go. Okay, so there's our piece for the top. And then for the bottom, of course, we want something that's a little bit bigger. So we're probably going to end up using most of this, I think. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to mark our corners. Because this is such a deep pan that I'm putting it into, if I had all of this stuff in the corners, it would it'd get really thick and gloppy in the corners, so we don't want that much. So we're going to customize this a little bit. Now this particular kind of puff pastry, that was all already rolled out. This is kind of the downside to this type, is that it does want to split at that when you don't have exactly the right temperature. But that's okay, we can fix that. The other kind that I sometimes use comes in a big block that you get to roll out. There's good points and bad points to that as well. But we've covered up everything there. The bottom is going to be just fine like that. Cutting off the excess. And then what we do is we take a little bit, we take an egg. I've got a whole egg here that I am just mixing it up, and I'm going to add just maybe a tablespoon of water to that. Just barely enough, just to water it down just a little bit. Now, as we've talked about before, eggs are something that are just sort of the baker's glue. It'll hold everything together. But the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just give this a little bit of wash on the whole inside of that. And then that will make it that the filling is less likely to ooze into the crust. So it'll give us a crispier crust all around. And I'm sure that my editor is going to want me to move things onto the overhead shot here a little bit more. Okay, so then we're going to take some of our filling here. And I'm not going to fill it too full, because remember, this is puff pastry, and that puff pastry is going to pop up on us here. And then I'm going to carry on here with making sure that my edges are well covered with egg. And then put the top on and just squish in around the sides so we've got a little bit of a seal. One nice thing about these disposable pans is not only are they handy if I want to share with somebody, but I don't have to worry about cleaning it afterwards. And then we take a little bit more of the egg and brush the whole top, because that's going to give us a nice glaze on there as well. Eggs are pretty important for this pastry bit. Go. And then this is another really important thing, is that we take a knife or something and poke some holes in the top. Because if you don't do that, the steam won't have a place to escape, and it is more likely to run out all over your stove. So there we go. We're going to give it, I mean, I could do something really decorative, but I think this will do the trick. So now I've got a cookie sheet here with some parchment paper on it, and I'm going to put the pie right onto that So this does two things. It makes it easy to get it in and out of the oven, and also if there is any spillage, it's not going to fall down into my oven and make a cleaning hassle. So now we're going to go into the oven, 350 degrees, 35 minutes, and we'll see you when this is done. And there we have it. Now what I did with those other little scraps that were left over after we cut the corners out was I just cut them into pieces, so we have kind of little crackers that go with this. Oh. Thank you for joining us today on Hilltop Stovetop, where we have made steak and ale pie with a puff pastry. Hope that you enjoyed today's video and that you'll remember to like and subscribe. And we'll see you at the next episode. And I'm going to just cut into this right now so you can see the ooey gooey goodness. We'll see you next time.